Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Gilded Gang Podcast. I'm your host, Will Deal, and today I want to talk about an article that I see kind of often, especially this time of year, and that is who is on your 49ers Mount Rushmore. So there's different ways to do this. I actually am a big believer in doing this in a way where it's not just the players, but you can pick coaches, you can pick owners. I know some fans like to put Eddie D on their Mount Rushmore because of his influence on obviously hiring Bill Walsh, but a bunch of other things as well that he did, with free agency and the way his investment on the team before free agency kind of became a thing where there was a salary cap that you have to really be aware of. And so, I'm okay with people doing it that way. But I wanted to get into what my personal Mount Rushmore is. And for me, again, I'm picking four central 49ers figures that I personally feel not only had the greatest impact on the direction of the franchise and the game, but also the game as it is today. So not just the way that the game used to be, and so I'm viewing it that way. And again, opening it up completely to whether you want to say coaches, whether you want to say owner, players. We should probably leave out assistant coaches and training staff. I don't know if we're going to go into that much depth, right? But maybe some amazing coordinators that we had, right? That you want to put on your Mount Rushmore. Hey, I'm wide open to it. Again, this is a more meant to be fun and to kind of have a good back and forth. So please make sure that you like and subscribe, and then put in the comments how you feel about the list that I came up with and what you would do differently and why you do that. I would really appreciate that. Really like hearing from you. So for me, let's just go ahead and get started. For me, there's really four figures that are central to any 49ers conversation as far as greatness, and these are the people that were most involved. And for me, it really does start with Bill Walsh. I mean, the architect. You cannot build the dynasty that we had without, to me, the greatest coach that I've ever seen and I've been watching. And even when I try to put my 49ers bias aside, and I know there's a lot of people that would argue for other coaches that have won more, that have won for longer, right? Whether it's Belichick, whether it's Lombardi, whether it's, you know, fill in the blank, right? There's plenty of other amazing coaches, and so, but for me, Bill Walsh, although he didn't technically invent the West Coast offense, because there were different variations of the West Coast offense and plays drawn from that. I personally believe he is the creator of what we consider today as the modern day West Coast offense, of the short to intermediate passing game with once in a while taking deep shots. And really that's what the NFL mostly is. I mean, even with quarterbacks that can throw the ball 50 yards, 60 yards down the field, you don't see guys just airing it out and having 50% completion rates, right? The point these days is to pick up chunk yards if you can, but it's really to pick up that 5, 10, 15 yards and then let the receivers and the playmakers make plays and control the clock, protect the ball, minimize turnovers. And really, that's actually what Bill believed in, and mostly it was out of necessity. And I don't want to get into too much history, but the reason he invented this was when he was a coordinator way back when for the Cincinnati Bengals, and he invented this for a quarterback that didn't have a very strong arm, and his name was Virgil Carter, and he was very accurate quarterback, very capable quarterback, but he didn't have a strong arm. So which is kind of ironic with our recent 49ers quarterbacks that don't have very strong arms, but you want to maximize what they can do in the underneath game, right? 5, 10, 15 yards from the line of scrimmage. And so that really is what Bill Walsh believed in and created that offense around. And then I think he grew to understand that or grew to believe that this was the best way to beat teams. It wasn't just for a quarterback that had a weaker arm, because Joe Montana, especially as he progressed in his career, his arm was plenty strong enough to, I mean, it probably won't rival Elway or Marino's, but it was plenty strong enough to get it 40 yards down the field, in stride without any issues. So it's not that he was trying to avoid doing this. It's just, I think by the point he got to the 49ers and realized that he could do this with Joe, not to mention the fact that he could utilize Joe's mobility. I mean, people forget, but Joe was very, very mobile early in his career. And he was a guy that he could pick up yards and he could do all the different things that you'd like to do in a varied, complex offense where you're utilizing some of the boot action and rollouts, the play action game. And sometimes the play action game, it did have three levels to it, right? Just as Kyle designs that today. And a lot of people think, you don't have that third, that deep level. Well, no, it always was there. It's just a matter of whether or not the quarterback that he has can execute it. So that's something. So again, I don't want to get, I've already gone really long on that, but this is just a very long winded way of saying Bill Walsh, just a master architect, the creator and inventor of what I believe is the modern day West Coast offense that's still used today in the NFL. And so his impact on the game, beyond just being the 49ers head coach, is just immense. And I mean, really, his tree continues, right? As we can see with Kyle being Mike Shanahan's son. Mike Shanahan was obviously Bill Walsh's former offensive coordinator back in the day. So Bill Walsh for me is number one. And number two, very predictably, the man we just discussed, having all that great mobility and ability to execute Bill's offense, the great Joe Cool, Joe Montana, or Joseph Clifford Montana Jr., as I like to call him sometimes, because, that's how much respect he deserves. He is, in my opinion, again, we can have a whole long debate about what greatness means, but he is, in my opinion, still the greatest quarterback that I've seen play based on a number of criteria, but one of which is not just that he could improvise and he again developed a game that was almost without weakness because he did have a better deep ball, especially as he got older in his career, in his 49ers career at least. And so that, those things, the mobility, the ability to hit guys on all three levels, his vision, things of that nature. His feet were really as light as possible, and Bill Walsh would rave about Joe Montana's feet. They were so light, but really his movements were just effortless almost, and his technique was excellent. He was a guy that I've often uh, just commented and posted that looked elegant out there. To me, greatness in a player's talent is when they make things look kind of easy and effortless, and there's a fluidity to it. So that might be another better way to describe it. So for me, that's why I put Joe Montana there. Not to mention the fact that 11 touchdowns, zero career interceptions in the big game, 4-0 in the Super Bowl. We can argue the fact that he only got there those four times. So he did lose in the playoffs sometimes. Understandable. I mean, there's always games too where things don't go your way, a call here and there, obviously turnover. I know, I don't want to bring up the Craig fumble in the 90 uh, playoff game against the Giants, but things like that. I know when they played Washington earlier in the 80s, holding call against Ronnie Lott, phantom holding call wasn't there. Things like that end up going on Joe's record as he lost that game, but there were factors obviously outside his control. I do think he could have made it to more Super Bowls. And then the other thing too that a lot of people talk about, especially when they get into comparisons of who is greater. Obviously, Brady's very recent, so that comparison comes up a lot with Joe. But if you really stop to think about it too, Joe only had Bill Walsh as his coach for about 8 seasons as the full-time starter. So from 1981, when Joe really took over as the primary starter from DeBerg, I believe, all the way to 88, right? Because by 89, it was already George Seifert. So you're talking about 8 full seasons. And in those 8 full seasons, he was able to get 3 Super Bowls with Bill Walsh. And then that 89 Super Bowl, really, that team was, again, built by the great Bill Walsh. and George, who's a very fine coach, really good coach. I like George Seifert a lot, but that team really was Bill's team, and he really had to just make sure he managed it, right? That he had the blueprint, he had the script, just make sure the guys execute it, and that's why that well-oiled machine did what they did. So technically, to me, him and Bill Walsh should have had, probably would have had 4 titles in 8 years, which is pretty much the ratio that Brady and Belichick had, and probably even better, really, because they had what, 6 Super Bowls together. I could be wrong on that one. Six Super Bowl victories together in 18 years. So it's they got twice as long together, more than twice as long, and they got only a few more Super Bowl victories too. So if we want to talk rings and all that kind of
But
stuff, yeah. Again, all that aside, Joe Montana, you can't go wrong with Joe Cool. When you needed him most, he really was the coolest guy in the room, and he could take you the distance of the field. He could take you, get you whatever you needed to get a win. And for me, again, just an excellent player to watch. I would show any kid, this is how you play quarterback. I'd show clips of Joe Montana before I showed any other quarterback, to be quite honest. So, and there've been plenty more talented than Joe. I don't want to disparage those guys, but the way Joe played, the technique and the fluidity, those types of things, the footwork, that's why I would put Joe as my second Mount Rushmore guy, 49er guy. All right. So with that, I guess we're on number 3 now. So for me, there there is no way to talk about Joe without talking about his running mate, right? His A guy that came on when Joe already had 2 Super Bowl victories, and this man allowed him to get 2 more, and that is, of course, the greatest receiver of all time, and this is unquestioned. I mean, he has all the records. Again, technique is amazing. He had game speed, and that is obviously the great Jerry Rice. And so you can't talk about 49ers without talking about Jerry. I mean, I got the jersey up here. So, he's just he was just an incredible player, just incredible work ethic, legendary work ethic, and just like I said, the technique, much like Joe, if I was looking at a wide receiver and saying, I need you to play like this guy, I would show him clips of Jerry Rice and say, that is who you should model your game after. And it's just amazing. Amazing player, incredible player. Like I said, the work ethic, unending, someone who was really in his prime for probably 16 years in the league, maybe a little bit longer than that. Someone who probably, even to the very end, probably could have been still a third receiver at well over 40 years old. I think he was probably about 42, 43 years old by the end there, when he finally got cut, and he did not walk away. And that's one thing too. I do admire when guys walk away and on their terms. Barry Sanders did that, and I thought, he's a great guy to watch too. He's an incredibly electric performer, but he knew when it was time to walk away. He didn't want to go to a different team. He just wanted to go out on his terms and go out on top. Uh, I don't think Jerry necessarily uh, didn't go out on top just because he played until such an advanced age. I mean, obviously, he was nowhere near who he was in his prime, but I still think Jerry had some in the tank still. I do. And I think he could have still played. I don't know, if he would have been a third receiver or fourth option for like a really good team, probably. But, someone who was just, he was not going to walk away because of just that desire he always has and still seems like he has. You see him at games, you see him, he's got the long, 49er helmet, gold chains on. He's celebrating, high-fiving the players. He just, he's got this infectious energy, this very childlike, kind of great energy, like in the best way, right? Maybe not childlike, but like a rookie. He still seems that way, and he still has that kind of hunger, and you can see it. You can see every time you see Jerry and you see him talk about the game as well. So, but again, incredible competitor, probably the hardest working player ever. Uh, it's especially at receiver. I mean, no one compares to what Jerry put his body through to get ready for a season. So, once the regular season came, he was more than ready. He was just it was easier, much easier for him because of just the rigor that he put on himself and running that hill and just making sure that he was always the best. He always had to be the cleanest guy, just impeccably dressed on the field and off of it, but especially, the uniform, all that. He was a meticulous guy, very detail oriented. And so, him and Joe, they go together with like peanut butter and jelly, right? So those two, that's my third guy. So I'd go, so again, we've just to recap, Walsh, and this is in no particular order. This is just the way I like to think of just these figures in 49ers history. But Walsh, Montana, Rice, and then here's where I'm sure a lot of fans have a lot of different opinions where, it could be Steve, it could be all these different figures in 49 because we have so many amazing legends. But to me, I kind of have to go back to Bill Walsh and what he wanted from his teams. And although he was an incredible offensive mind, it was also his desire for the team, especially in those early years when the team was so bad, he wanted the team to set a tone. And no one in 49ers history at since then, at that time or since, has set a tone like Ronnie Lott. So for me, Ronnie Lott just could play safety, could play corner, all over the field. I mean, really, he was Ed Reed before Ed Reed, right? He was someone who maybe probably a much harder hitter, I would say, because Ed was more of a ball hawk. But I have to say, I mean, that's some probably an underrated aspect of Ronnie's game. So, go back and watch. Not that just the amazing highlights of the hard hits, the incredibly vicious hits he would lay on people back then that would 70% of those would already have been outlawed, right? But he was not, especially in his era. I would never say he was someone who was considered like too aggressive or dirty or anything like that. It's just those things. The game has changed. I think that he was a guy who always wanted to dislodge the ball from the receiver if they got to it, but if not, he was a ball hawk, and that's why I made that comparison as just to throw a name out there for those of us who didn't really get to watch Ronnie a lot. Like myself, I didn't get to watch actual live games, but I've studied a lot of portions of games and watched old games and old tape just to see the movement and the vision. And he was just such a smart player and just knew he would study, much like Joe and Jerry just studied and worked so hard. Same thing with Ronnie, just an incredible worker, just a very physical presence. And he was someone that, although you had this incredible offense and it was easy to forget how incredible the defense was, when that defense was ranked in the top three, let's say, in the league, that's really when the 49ers were at their very, very best. And that's what happened in that 89 Super Bowl. You're talking about one of the top scoring defenses in the league that year. I want to say, I don't think he was on in 84 yet, but the 88 team, again, very good defense. And so it all really, really got kicked off when Ronnie moved to safety and was able to patrol everything. Right. And I just think, as that first big central defensive figure, and there were so many, and all very worthy players, I just think he sticks out to me the most because of who he was on the field every single time. Obviously, we know the story about cutting off his finger, cutting off the pinky finger, and then coming back and playing. These days, nobody would think about doing something like that, or I should say very few would. There's still a few old school souls out there on the field, but that was just the mentality that he had. He really believed in playing for his brothers, playing for the guys around him. He didn't play for himself and the glory of what it was to be, a professional football player. He played because he had pride and he had love for the guys around him. And he played, like I said, the most tenacious safety ever, really. And so those are my four. those are the 4 guys that I truly probably will never move off those spots, or I should say move off that mountaintop, just because of everything I've already studied on them, and read about them. Just, a lot of time has well, I honestly, I put in a lot of time over the years. I have really lost count, but just being able to get to know who these people were as competitors, as professionals. Never really had the chance to meet any of them. But hopefully, I mean, Ronnie's around a lot. Jerry's around a lot at signings and different things and different events. So I could probably get to meet them. Maybe Joe one day. We'll see. And obviously, unfortunately with Bill, it'll have to be only when I get to the other side. But yeah, it just incredible figures in 49ers history and really in the history of the game overall. So please, again, if you want to continue this debate in the comments, I encourage it. Always try to have a healthy debate. Obviously, I really enjoy it. I enjoy it. This is something that I do because I enjoy it. Again, diehard 49er fan since way back when, early 90s when I was little. So for me, this is something that I really enjoy doing, and hopefully you get some enjoyment out of it as well. And we can continue this in the comments as well. And if you really like the channel, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and I'll look forward to putting out more videos for you. Thanks very much, Faithful. Take care. See ya.